I want to share with you a little story. So the day I'm making this video today, on the 18th of November 2016, 5 years ago, almost to this very second, about 11 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call. So it's the 18th of November 2011. I got a phone call. And that phone call changed everything in my life. The call was from my mum. She'd been diagnosed with liver cancer a few months before, and she called me. And she sounded weak. And she said, "I think it's time." And that's all she had to say. And I knew I had to get down there to London, where she lived. So I made arrangements for my children to be looked after. And the next day, which is tomorrow, I got down there. And then I had 10 days of her, because on the 29th of November, she passed away. And I'm only telling you this because it's been 5 years and it should have been easier for me to process. And in some ways, the time has helped heal a few wounds. But grieving is always going to be with you, with us as human beings. We always hold that space for grief. It could get easier. It doesn't ever go away. And that's why I wrote a book. That was my way of processing my own grief of both my parents' loss, because my father passed away 13 years before that. So now it left me with a hole in my life, a hole that I had to fill myself. And I filled it by writing a grief diary. And that grief diary turned into my book that was released this year. So the beginning of March this year, I published a book called Good Grief. And that was my way of processing my own grief, and also my way of helping other people process grief as well. So in the book, it shares my story, but it also shares my development, my awareness, my passion, my learning about how I've helped grief help myself, how I've turned bad grief into good grief. So I'm going to share with you the first chapter. And the first chapter is called Saying Goodbye to My Mother. The night nurse gently shook me awake and softly said, "It's time." I nodded, slightly groggily, allowing the enormity of those two little words to sink in. I took a deep breath in and sat up, my eyes adjusting to the dimly lit room. The room was a familiar one. It was my mother's bedroom, the one she had slept in since I was 5 years old. She had slept alone for the past 15 years. My mum was widowed. She had lost her husband, my darling dad, to cancer. I had also been there with him as he passed away, which made me feel like quite the expert at saying goodbye to a parent. But in this case, past experience doesn't seem to be much consolation. I walked over to my mother's bed on the other side of the room and looked down at her tiny, sleeping frame. She was breathing, gently, but very deeply. Her breathing had changed ever so slightly from when I kissed her goodnight several hours before. I felt very contemplative as I thought about letting my mother go. I also thought about myself as a daughter. In a few moments, I would also have to let go of the idea that I am a daughter. My thoughts were gently brought back into the present moment by comfort, which unbelievably, yet ironically, was the name of the Marie Curie nurse who stood by my side. She held my hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze and asked if I was ready. I paused for a moment, deliberating this interesting choice of word. I decided it was a good word. If she had asked me if I was fine or all right, this would have been odd. But for me to prepare for what was about to happen, of course, I had to be ready. I swallowed back the lump in my throat and squeezed the tears back into their tear ducts. I looked up and flashed her a brave smile. Yes, I nodded. How much time have we got? I managed to whisper. She cocked her head as if to indicate not very much. I asked her if I had enough time to light some candles and burn some incense. She understood and urged me to be as quick as I could. I stepped away and kissed my mother's ever so slightly furrowed forehead. It was very soft and warm, and I knew that it wouldn't be much longer before the warmth subsided. In the next room, I collected the candles and the incense burner, and this momentary distance allowed me to compose myself and prepare myself for what was about to happen. Reality was fast looming and smacking into me like a train on a track. The time had finally come to say goodbye. My mum was actually leaving me. This was the moment I had been dreading, but not quite believing. My mother had been given the diagnosis of terminal liver cancer over 18 months previously. She was a hugely optimistic person and did not want to hear any talk of her life expectancy, so we did not find out how long she had left. And because of this uncertainty, I'm not sure I had taken the terminal part of this illness seriously until this actual moment. As I lit one scented tea light after another, I quickly filled the room with candlelight, and as that woody, vanilla aroma swirled around the room, it created a calm and relaxing and meditative atmosphere. I put her soft mantras on in the background and came back to holding my mother's hand. I closed my eyes, and for the real first time I said a real prayer to a real God. Unlike my agnostic father, my mother had held traditional Hindu beliefs of God and reincarnation, the soul and karma, and it felt right for me to step into her belief system in that moment, to be in the same thought space as her. I silently asked God for her guides, her angels, her loved ones in spirit, to come and get her when she was ready, and I informed them that I was ready to facilitate her soul liberate itself from the physical world and her dying body. I wanted the ambience to be just right, just how she would have wanted and expected it. The room was silent, apart from the soft music playing, beautifully peaceful and calm, and there was an air of expectancy. I held my face close to my mother's cheek, and I could feel her ebbing breath against my own tear-stained cheek. Her breath was still warm and smelt slightly of minty mouthwash. I closed my eyes and knew that it was time to say goodbye. I told her in my mind over and over how much I loved her. I was sorry for everything I needed to be sorry for. I loved her and I would miss her. The children loved her, they would miss her, and I hoped her soul's onward journey would be peaceful, and I loved her and I really loved her, and I was sorry for everything. And after a few moments of this nonsensical, giddy repetition, my instincts dictated that I lift my head to kiss her. And as I did, she took her final breath of air and then exhaled very slowly, almost like she had a slow puncture. I watched her brow instantly unfurrow and every muscle of her face relax. Her expression was peaceful, and she appeared to have an ethereal glow about her. Her fingers uncurled out of my grip, and it was over. That was it. She had gone. No drama, no bells and whistles, nothing. Just an empty shell left behind. My mother was no longer inside her body. Comfort squeezed my hand again, which was still clutching on to my mother's limp, soulless hand, and then stepped outside the room, leaving me alone with my disbelief and my mother's lifeless body. I just stared at her blankly, immobilized and frozen. My emotions and my breath seemed to have also escaped me. I was helpless, numb, empty, and hollow. I felt like I had also left my body, and I somehow became a detached observer floating over this extremely surreal tableau. I continued to silently stare at this body that only a few moments ago contained my mother. The body that, as I remember from my father's passing, would be cooling down rapidly and would only take a few minutes to turn to stone. I placed a soft kiss goodbye on her smooth, warm forehead, knowing that this would be the last warm kiss I would be able to feel, and allowed my tears to flow. But suddenly, they had all dried up, as if in that moment I had also turned to stone. And I share this with you because I want you to know that even if you've never experienced anything like this in your life, grief is something that can attack us all. That we lose things, we lose people, things change. And it is that deep sense of loss and uncertainty that can be a trigger for those feelings of grief. So in my way, I want to help myself, and also in doing so help others to know that they are not alone. And through my experience, I want you to know that you are not alone either. Thanks for watching.